You know what absolutely kills me about modern cars? They're designed to fall apart. I mean, come on, planned obsolescence is literally baked into the business model now. But there was this brief shining moment in the 90s when manufacturers actually gave a damn about longevity. Maybe it was the Japanese forcing everyone to up their game. Maybe it was old school engineering pride making its last stand. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because engineers still ran these companies instead of MBAs. Whatever the reason, the 90s produced some absolute tanks that refused to die even 30 years later. I was at a stoplight last week next to a beat-to-hell 93 Accord. Paint, oxidized, bumper, held on with zip ties. Interior probably smelling like 3 decades of fast food. But you know what? That 4-cylinder was purring like it just rolled off the assembly line. The owner caught me staring and just shrugged. 300,000 miles, he said. Original engine, original transmission. That's when it hit me. We need to talk about the last generation of cars built to outlive us all. So let's start with the obvious king of longevity. The Toyota Land Cruiser 80 series, produced from 1990 to 1997. This thing was essentially a military vehicle dressed up for soccer moms. Toyota engineers basically asked themselves, what would happen if they overbuilt everything by about 200%? The answer? You get a vehicle that laughs at 500,000 miles. The 1FZ engine, that glorious straight six, was apparently designed by people who thought engine failure was a personal insult. 300,000 miles. Those are rookie numbers for an 80 series. I've personally seen odometers that have rolled over twice. The full-time four-wheel drive system was so robust that Toyota basically used the same design for the next 20 years. Why change perfection, right? These things are still daily drivers. In places where road is a generous term, Australian mining companies bought them by the dozen because they calculated it was cheaper to maintain one Land Cruiser for 20 years than replace lesser vehicles every 5. Think about that for a second. A vehicle so reliable that accountants, the most risk-averse humans on Earth, bet their bottom line on it. But here's where things get interesting. While Toyota was building the indestructible 80 series, their luxury division was cooking up something even more remarkable. The Lexus LS400, launched in 1989 but perfected throughout the 90s, wasn't just built to last. It was built to last in complete silence while cradling you in leather luxury. The development story is insane. 6 years, $1 billion, 60 designers, 1,700 engineers, 24 engineering teams, 450 prototypes, all to build one car. The one UZFE V8 engine was so over-engineered that tuners today are pushing 600 horsepower through stock internals. But that's not even the crazy part. Lexus engineers tested these engines by running them at redline for hundreds of hours straight. Then they'd tear them down and measure wear. If they found any, and I mean any, measurable wear, they'd redesign the component. The result? An engine that could run 300,000 miles and still balance a champagne glass on it at idle. Yeah, that famous commercial wasn't CGI or trickery. That's just what happens when you machine tolerances to aerospace standards. The suspension was designed to last 400,000 kilometers without major service. The transmission? Same story. Even the leather was selected for 20-year durability. One automotive journalist famously bought a used LS400 with 200,000 miles and daily drove it for another decade. documenting every single repair. Total non-maintenance repairs over 10 years, under $2,000 for a luxury car. That's not normal. That's not even close to normal. Now, while Lexus was revolutionizing luxury reliability, Honda was doing something equally impressive at the other end of the spectrum. The 1994 to 1997 Accord, the CD generation, for you chassis code nerds, was Honda at their absolute peak. No turbochargers, no direct injection, no complicated electronics, just bulletproof engineering executed perfectly. The F-22 four-cylinder engine in these things was essentially agricultural equipment, dressed up for commuting. I mean that as the highest compliment. These engines had timing belts that were supposed to be changed every 90,000 miles. Supposed to. I know people who went double that. Not recommended, obviously, but the fact that the engine survived speaks volumes. The manual transmissions were essentially unbreakable. The automatics, well, if you changed the fluid occasionally, they'd outlast your grandchildren. The double wishbone suspension was so well designed that these cars still handle better than most modern economy sedans, despite having the structural rigidity of overcooked pasta by today's standards. But what really made these Accords immortal was the simplicity. No variable valve timing to fail. No complicated emissions equipment beyond basic stuff. No electronic throttles to glitch out. Just pure mechanical simplicity, executed with Japanese precision. There's a reason you still see these everywhere, usually held together with duct tape and hope, but still running. They refuse to die. It's like they're powered by spite at this point. Speaking of refusing to die, we need to talk about the Toyota Camry from 92 to 96, the XV10 generation. Now I know what you're thinking. The Camry, really? The most boring car ever made. But that's exactly the point. Toyota made it boring on purpose. Every single decision was made in favor of reliability over everything else. Excitement? Who needs it? Style? Overrated. But you know what's not overrated? Starting every single morning for 3 decades straight. The 2.2-liter 5SFE four-cylinder in these Camrys was descended from the engine family that powered Toyota's Group B rally cars. Yes, really. Obviously detuned to the point of being comatose. But that racing heritage meant the bottom end was hilariously overbuilt for grocery-getting duty. These engines commonly hit 400,000 miles on original internals. The 3-liter V6 was even better, smooth as silk and tough as nails. Toyota's engineers reportedly benchmarked these engines against industrial equipment. Not other cars, industrial equipment. The transmissions were programmed for comfort, not performance, which meant they shifted early and often, never stressing themselves. The suspension was soft, which meant less stress on mounting points. Even the paint was formulated for 20-year durability in harsh climates. Every single decision was about longevity. Boring? Absolutely. Still running 30 years later? Also, absolutely. Meanwhile, Honda was applying this same philosophy to their compact lineup. The Civic from 92 to 2000, covering both the EG and EK generations, represents peak Honda. These cars weighed nothing, sipped fuel like hummingbirds, and absolutely refused to brake. The D-Series engines were so simple that a moderately talented goldfish could rebuild one. Single overhead cam, 2 valves per cylinder, port fuel injection. That's it. That's the whole engine. But simple doesn't mean weak. These engines loved to rev and could take absurd amounts of abuse. The manual transmissions were so good that people still seek them out for engine swaps today. Even the supposedly fragile automatic transmissions would last forever if you just changed the fluid occasionally, which, admittedly, nobody did. But still, the EG and EK Civics became the foundation of the tuner movement, not because they were fast stock, but because they were unkillable. You could boost them, beat them, bounce them off the rev limiter for hours, and they'd keep coming back for more. There's a reason every third car at a track day is still a 90s Civic. They're the cockroaches of the automotive world, and I mean that with absolute respect. But not everything unkillable from the 90s came from Japan. Enter the Volvo 240, specifically the final 1993 model year. Now, technically, the 240 had been around since the 70s, but the 93 represents the ultimate evolution of bulletproof Swedish engineering. The B230F engine, the legendary red block, was so overbuilt that Volvo themselves didn't really know its limits. These engines regularly hit 500,000 miles. Some have documented over 1 million. The 240's body was essentially a bank vault with windows. The doors alone weighed more than entire modern cars. Crash safety? This thing was designed when crash safety meant you survived, and whatever you hit didn't. The suspension was agricultural, the interior was sparse, the acceleration was theoretical, but it would outlive you, your children, and possibly your children's children. There's a cult around these cars now, and for good reason. They represent the last of old Volvo, before Ford ownership, before complications, before they tried to be BMW. Just Swedish pragmatism executed in steel. The fact that you can still buy every single part to keep one running says everything. 30 years later, and parts availability is better than some 5-year-old cars. While Volvo was perfecting their tank, Mercedes-Benz was creating their own monument to longevity with the W994 E-Class, built from 1984 to 1995. But achieving peak reliability in the early 90s, these cars were engineered when Mercedes still thought a warranty claim was a personal failure. The inline-six engines, particularly the M103 and later M104, were essentially industrial equipment masquerading as passenger car motors. These cars were so overbuilt that Mercedes reportedly lost money on every single one sold. The accountants were horrified. The engineers didn't care. They had a reputation to maintain. The result was a car that became the default taxi in countries where taxis run 24/7 and maintenance is whatever you can do on the side of the road with basic tools. The W124 interior was a masterclass in ergonomics and durability. Switches that still click satisfyingly after 3 decades. Seats that somehow get more comfortable with age. Climate control systems that still blow ice cold after 500,000 miles. Even the paint was special, with Mercedes using a process that made it nearly impossible for rust to take hold. Nearly impossible. Not completely impossible, because physics exists, but they tried their damn it. I know a guy who bought a W124 300E new in '91, still daily drives it. 600,000 miles on the original engine and transmission. His biggest expense? Tires. His second biggest? Nothing. Because nothing else breaks. That's not normal. That's German over-engineering at its finest before the bean counters took over. Let's shift gears to something a bit more rugged. The Toyota 4Runner. Specifically, the second generation. From 89 to 95. While everyone was going crazy for the Land Cruiser, the 4Runner was quietly being just as indestructible for half the price. Based on the pickup platform, these things inherited all of Toyota's truck toughness, but in a package that could actually fit in a parking space. The 20RE four-cylinder engine in these things was agricultural, literally. Toyota used versions of this engine in forklifts. 150 horsepower on a good day, but it would make that 150 horsepower forever. The V6 option was quicker, but somehow even more bulletproof. These engines were so reliable that when one finally died, owners would just buy another 4Runner with a blown transmission and swap parts, mechanical Legos for adults. The four-wheel drive system was proper old school, manual locking hubs, transfer case you could rebuild in your garage, solid rear axle that could take obscene abuse, no computers to confuse, no sensors to fail, just mechanical components doing mechanical things. Forever. These forerunners became the default vehicle for everyone, from contractors to adventurers to people who just wanted something that would start every morning no matter what. They're still all over the western United States, usually with 300,000 miles, rust holes you could put your fist through, and engines that still purr like kittens. Well, very tired kittens, but still. Now for something completely different, the Subaru Legacy, from 90 to 99. The first and second generations. While everyone else was building rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, Subaru was quietly perfecting all-wheel drive for the masses. The EJ Series engines in these cars were weird. Boxer configuration, head gaskets that liked to fail around 150,000 miles. But here's the thing. Once you fixed the head gaskets, these engines were immortal. The all-wheel drive system was brilliantly simple. No complicated electronics, just mechanical differentials doing their thing. The manual transmissions were bulletproof. The automatics were decent if you changed the fluid. The bodies rusted if you looked at them wrong, but the mechanical bits just kept going and going and going. These became the default car for anywhere it snowed. Vermont, Subaru Legacy. Colorado, Subaru Legacy. Upstate New York, you guessed it. They developed this reputation for getting through anything winter could throw at them, while being boring enough that insurance was cheap and reliable enough that you could ignore maintenance for embarrassing lengths of time. Not that you should, but you could. The interiors were nothing special. The styling was forgettable. The performance was adequate. But they started every morning when it was -20 and there was 3 feet of snow on the ground. In the 90s, that was magic. Today it's expected. The Legacy made it expected. Finally, let's talk about the forgotten hero of 90s reliability, the Infiniti Q35. Launched in '89 but refined throughout the 90s, this was Nissan's attempt to out-Lexus. They failed at that, obviously, but they accidentally created one of the most reliable luxury cars nobody remembers. The V845DE V8 engine was a masterpiece of over-engineering. All aluminum, dual overhead cams, variable intake geometry. Sounds complicated, right? Except Nissan engineered it like they were building it for a nuclear submarine. These engines regularly hit 300,000 miles without major work. They were so robust that people today are turbocharging them to 600 horsepower on stock internals. The rest of the car was typically weird Nissan. 4-wheel steering that actually worked. Active suspension that didn't brake constantly, interior that was somehow both luxurious and bizarre, but it all worked. For decades, without complaint. The problem was marketing. While Lexus was showing champagne glasses and Mercedes was trading on heritage, Infiniti was showing Zen gardens and talking about philosophy. The car-buying public was confused, but those who bought them discovered they'd accidentally purchased Japanese reliability with legitimate performance and luxury. These cars are still sleepers today. Literally nobody expects a 30-year-old Infiniti to be quick, comfortable, and reliable. But they are. All three. So what made these cars so special? Why could the 90s produce vehicles that refuse to die while modern cars need software updates to function? Part of it was competition. The Japanese had spent the 80s proving they could build reliable cars. The 90s was about proving they could build anything reliably. Luxury cars, sports cars, trucks. The Germans and Americans had to respond or die. Part of it was the sweet spot of technology. Fuel injection was perfected, but not overcomplicated. Electronics existed, but weren't running everything. Material science had advanced, but cost-cutting hadn't taken over yet. It was this perfect moment where manufacturers knew how to build things to last and hadn't yet figured out that planned obsolescence was more profitable. But I think the biggest factor was pride. Engineers still ran these companies. They took personal pride in reliability. A warranty claim wasn't just a cost, it was a failure. A car dying at 200,000 miles wasn't acceptable. It was embarrassing. So they overbuilt everything. They tested until failure, then redesigned to prevent that failure. They benchmarked against industrial equipment, not other cars. Today's cars are faster, safer, more efficient, and more comfortable than anything from the 90s. That's undeniable. A modern Camry would destroy a 90s Camry in every measurable metric, except one: longevity. That modern Camry might make it to 200,000 miles if you're religious about maintenance. The 90s Camry will make it to 400,000 while being actively neglected. It's not that modern manufacturers can't build cars to last. They choose not to. Leases are calculated on 3-year cycles. Warranties expire at 60,000 miles. Software becomes obsolete in 5 years. The entire business model depends on you buying a new car every few years. Why would they build something to last forever? But those 90s cars, they're still out there, still running, still refusing to die. Every morning, hundreds of thousands of people get into their 30-year-old Accords, Camrys, 4Runners, and Civics, turn the key, and drive to work. No drama, no fuss. Just mechanical reliability doing what it's supposed to do. There's something beautiful about that. In a world of planned obsolescence, subscription features, and software-locked capabilities, these cars represent something pure. Engineering for the sake of engineering. Building the best product possible and letting the market sort it out. Pride in craftsmanship that transcends profit margins. I saw a statistic recently that the average age of cars on American roads is now over 12 years. That's not because people are nostalgic. It's because a well-maintained 90s car is often more reliable than a modern one with half the miles. Think about that. 30-year-old technology outperforming modern engineering, not in performance or efficiency or safety, but in the most basic metric of all, still working. Maybe that's the real tragedy here. We know how to build things to last forever. We've proven it. These 90s cars are rolling proof that it's possible to engineer reliability that spans decades. But we choose not to. We choose profits over pride, shareholders over satisfaction, quarterly earnings over quality. But those 90s engineers, they didn't get the memo. They built cars like their reputations depended on it, because they did. And 30 years later, their reputations are still intact, rolling down highways on original engines. Testament to what happens when you prioritize engineering excellence over everything else. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if a manufacturer today decided to build a car like it was 1995. No planned obsolescence, no software locks, no artificial limitations, just overbuilt mechanicals designed to run forever. Price it reasonably, market it honestly, and see what happens. It'll never happen, of course. The shareholders would revolt, the dealers would panic, the entire business model would collapse. But imagine if it did. Imagine buying a car knowing your grandkids could daily drive it. Imagine the freedom of knowing your transportation was solved not for 3 years or 5 years, but for decades. That's what these 90s cars represented. Freedom from the upgrade cycle, independence from the dealership, security that transcended warranty periods. They weren't just cars. They were promises. Promises that if you did basic maintenance, they'd keep running. Forever. And the craziest part? They kept that promise. 30 years later, they're still keeping it. Every cold start, every highway mile, every grocery run is proof that it's possible to build things that last. We just have to want to. So next time you see a beat-up 90s Accord at a stoplight, don't laugh at the faded paint and sagging headliner. Respect it. That car has likely outlived 3 generations of its replacements. It's seen hundreds of thousands of miles. It's been through multiple owners, countless repairs, and probably some questionable maintenance, and it's still there, still running, still refusing to die. That's not just reliability, that's immortality, and we'll never see its like again.